He's rushed me in. Hello and welcome to episode 72 of the Movies in a Podshell podcast, the podcast where we take a theme. This week ain't really a theme, it's just a Dune Part 2 Spoilercast. As always, I'm joined by the daddiest sandworm of them all. Not the grandfather worm, but the dad worm. You can call him John.
You're struggling tonight, mate.
Maybe. I've literally, I got in from work about, today just ended up getting out. This week's been out of control.
Yeah.
We're both under the cosh, and we're both under the cosh, but we're both still delivering free content to everyone.
Jamie's just had baked beans on toast because he got stuck on the motorway in 3 crashes. That's how dedicated he is to being on time to record at 8 p.m. Beans on toast.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think... Yeah,
there you go.
I'll be honest, I would have loved nothing more to cancel tonight. But you know what? I also need to spread the word that Dune Part 2 is not the greatest sci-fi film ever made. And how can we say that 3 weeks after release? Well, it's 4 weeks after release. Now you guys are listening to it because this is going to be released, well, not tomorrow, so next week. John, anyway, enough of that. What I was going to just say is, of course, we still have T-shirts on sale. You can go to moviesinaPODshell.sumupstore.com. God, what? I need to find my flow. MoviesinaPODshell.sumupstore.com to find our T-shirts. We still have all sizes available, so go and check them out. We should be releasing maybe a new one in summertime. We did have another one on the go, but we got there was me and John, as you know, had a bit of it was our first debate. It was a very social network style debate. He was going to run off
Eduardo with the laptop slamming on the table.
Yeah, he was going to screw me over. He's going to steal the company from me and screw me over the company.
Sorry.
In reality, John and I don't really argue. It was just a very nice conversation about it. You can also find us on YouTube. You couldn't last week because we had an issue with the upload because Riverside had an update. So we love Riverside, but just don't do that again or we will cancel our subscription. You can also find us on Instagram. I'm joking. We're absolute shills for Riverside. We love it. It's so good. But last week, not on form.
No.
And you can also find us on Instagram, Movies in a Podshell. You can find John at jcb.video, and you can see all the fun stuff he's been doing. But John, it's been a week since we've recorded because we did have a 6-week break because you were pretty much dying.
And I sound so much better now, don't I? Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was. Did you all? It was crazy. Like they did actually have to resuscitate you at one point. You were dying.
Stop, because someone will not get this humour and will believe it. But no, mate, it's been ropey. It's been ropey.
You still sound ropey. It's just ridiculous.
I still sound ropey, but it's. I feel like I listen back. So, well, I edited the pod last week, but I was listening back and I was like, oh man, it's so painful to listen to. But anyway, I'm here again. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Dune, and I'm excited to talk about it because I bloody loved it, and we'll get into it. But I think, have you got anything from what you've been watching? I've got one thing to mention quickly, if we've got time.
Of course we've got time. We have got time. We've got all the time in the world. We're here now, so we may as well just crack on. Do you want to go tell us what you've been watching first?
So I've been putting this off because, as you guys know who listen to the pod, I am a wimp with horror-y things, and I'd watched a trailer and thought, oh, this looks quite creepy, but I'm going to stick with it. It's Apple TV's Constellation, and it stars Noomi Rapace. Obviously, for me, big fan with the Girl Drunk Tattoo series, but also mainly Prometheus.
Yeah.
I love Prometheus, so there we go. Essentially, it starts with an incident on the International Space Station, and it's kind of like, it's in the trailer, you see they're experimenting with a form or a new form of matter, and then something happens. I don't know what the something is yet. I've literally seen the first episode, and it's kind of jumping back and forth in time, and it's one of those where, you know,
it's directed by Christopher Nolan.
No, I tell you what it reminded me of. It's kind of got the Arrival thing where you're never quite sure where you're at with timings.
Okay.
But the production value is insane. Like, Apple production value is just nuts. Like,
it's because they release like one show every 2 months.
Yeah.
But it's to be fair to Apple, I will say that they don't release any. There's nothing that they release that's crap.
I would argue recently I've enjoyed more shows on Apple TV than on Netflix personally. And then
I've cancelled Netflix. I don't have it anymore.
yeah, and then
It's gone, and I don't care.
the other caveat to that was Now TV, which we push all the time, which is essentially HBO shows. But I was just staggered watching this. The production value is insane, and it's kind of a mystery box story. And I've read some spoiler-free reviews, kind of saying it takes its time to give you the answers because there's a lot of setup and a lot of questions, kind of like in Lost. However, it's only 8 episodes anyway, so if I know it's getting like sorted in 8 episodes, then I'm happy to roll with it. But no, it's great.
Yeah.
And enjoying it so far, and looking forward to carrying on with it. But that's about it from me.
Yeah, you've not seen anything else? No.
No, what are you typing? What are you doing?
Well, I'm just typing, John.
No,
As you know, like I've just got in the door, so I'm just tidying things up. I don't know why I'm being all like this, like jazz hands. I'm just tidying things up. I've got the questions in order. I'm just looking at some stuff. The one thing that just keeps coming back to my mind is, why is his name Paul? It's a silly. If anyone's out there is called Paul, I mean, it's a fine name on planet Earth outside of a sci-fi like book, but I don't know why he's called Paul. Anyway, so I'll tell you what I have been watching. Not much really, at all. I have watched Gladiator on
cool.
Yes, so I watched Gladiator on 4K. So I finally bought Gladiator on 4K. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance. Ah, yes. The sad thing about watching Gladiator is I think it blew my subwoofer. So my subwoofer's dead.
You've not had long out of that. That's poor.
So it's longer than I thought. So I had to. So what I did was I upgraded my AV system to a 7.1. And it had I just thought I'd future-proof it, so I got an 8K slot and everything, just in case. I've got nothing that's 8K, but I can use it for the next 15 years, hopefully. And I've got a 5.1, a relatively low profile 5.1 surround sound, because it's in the living room. I don't want it to be too intrusive. John's got his own dedicated film room in I think his third spare bedroom. That was a joke. So his is a lot bigger than mine. Speakers, might I add. So my subwoofer, I don't. So it's dead. It's completely. So I watched Gladiator, then I turned it off because I watched the director's cut. And I don't know if I've ever seen the director's cut, actually, because I only ever had the DVD of it, and I don't think I ever watched it on Blu-ray. So it was the first time I'd actually seen it in HD, it's incredible. So yeah, I finished it the night after, because I had to go to bed because I had work really early in the morning. And yeah, there's usually a little green light on the back of it, and I was like, what's going on there? Changed the leads. It's completely and utterly dead. So the good thing is that I will share with you, and this is why you should buy bricks and mortar if you can in terms of this kind of stuff. So Richer Sounds are brilliant. Peter Tyson, this is where I bought mine from, which is another kind of Richer Sounds copy. Called them up, I found my order thing online. I don't know how exciting this is for everyone to listen to, probably boring as hell. I bought it in 2021, so I didn't even realise. August 2021, so I didn't even realise that I've nearly had it. It'll be 3 years in August, so I think it's under warranty. I think it's under. No, it's pathetic, mate. Absolutely pathetic from Wolfdale. Sort it out, Wolfdale. So I'm a bit pissed off, I'll be honest. So that's dead. So at the moment, I think my ears are kind of got into the fact that there's no sub. It's still decently bassy because the speakers are fine, but
smaller speakers rely on a sub to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So as soon as you remove it, it feels. It's not to me, but it feels it because it's the crossover frequency. This is really dull and really boring for people, so I'm gonna sharply get away from it for anyone who does not have a hi-fi setup.
Do you know what's it's really annoying as well. So, I mean, this would be a good time to actually swiftly talk about why a 5.1 is important if you can get one, and the reason why everyone watches subtitles nowadays. And it's just reminded me of something else we need to talk about. So subtitles nowadays is because you can't hear the dialogue, because the dialogue is mostly made for cinema, so you've got the big central speaker
environment. Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of kind of TVs are thinner and they don't have that middle speaker, so you lose a lot of the dialogue. But that reminded me of something that I saw the other day. We will get back to Gladiator, I promise. And John, you're like, I feel like I sent it to you because I was fuming when I seen it. It's basically like there was a producer of a show was saying that nowadays people watch things on subtitles, but also as well as that, they're being told like to dumb things down, like so dumb down TV shows.
It's
like
to repeat what the plot is at multiple points because they're expecting it to be a second screen experience. So I think
Yes.
that explains so many Netflix shows that I don't get on with. And I think it also, when we start talking about the difference between a HBO show and an Apple show, I think that's the difference.
I do. No, I do.
I genuinely think that's, now they've said it and I've heard it out loud, I'm like, that makes so much sense. That kind of attitude of like, oh, they're not actually really paying attention to this.
No, because they're on the phone and then they like look up every now and again and like they'll read the subtitles and then look up and that's why they keep repeating the plot. The plot's thinner. It doesn't like develop
to track and follow.
Yeah,
and as they made the point, like the amount it costs to produce and make these things, it's staggering. Like
it's embarrassing. I was talking to Claire, Miss On Scene, who was on a couple of few shows ago about this as well, and because I said like, look, I said like, this is I genuinely think that's the problem with Netflix. That's why it's not the reason why I've cancelled Netflix, because I will miss a few bits and pieces on there. I want to see the new Adam Sandler film, Spaceman, I think it's called.
Yeah, it is good.
But yeah, it does. It looks great. But I have kept Amazon and Now TV because I do think, and I've got Apple TV as well, which is plenty to be honest. I do think Now TV has the highest quality of TV, and she jokingly said like, are you like you're basically one of those A24 people for like HBO? I'm like, maybe. I said I do think it's a higher quality. I think it's wicked. Like, so yeah, I just found that absolutely staggering. Anyway, right, Gladiator,
pretty good, right?
It blew my hi-fi. Pretty good. It's pretty good, right? It is pretty good. It's pretty goddamn good, and I've seen it. I realised like I can like watch. I know it's scene for scene almost, like 'cause I watched it on repeat when I was young. What a fantastic! And there were so many bits that like I didn't quite understand when I was younger. So like when he puts the maggots in the wound, like to clean it, like that kind of thing. I'm not going to go through and tell you about the plot because everyone knows the plot of Gladiator. He's
Gladiator
a general.
2 is coming very, very soon as well, though.
Is it going to be good?
I have no idea, but Ridley's directed it, and considering like what he did with Napoleon and the set pieces, I still think there's going to be some great moments in it, even if I'm not 100% on board with the plot. But I'm not going to turn my nose up to something until I see it.
Do we know?
No. I think it's based around a descendant or a boy he inspires. I think that's all I know. Or it might be like Joaquin Phoenix's son. I can't even remember. But I'm not overly... Oh, no, do you remember the little boy in it who... There's the woman who's not his wife, who's at one point has the son. Yeah. I think it may be about him.
Okay, the little boy. I can't remember what his name is, but he's
like Paul Mescal. And like Paul Mescal's a great shout as well because like he's not like... He's muscly in like a traditional sense, but he's not like shredded Marvel kind of BS. He's like...
Yeah, it's
pretty much imagine him as a Roman soldier kind of thing, which is what they're going for. So,
same as me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I'm looking forward to it. And I do think with Ridley as well, with his age, I'm just taking every single thing he does and just enjoying it while it's still there.
I think so. Like,
do you know what I mean? Like,
I feel like Napoleon really got a hard time or got massively overlooked.
Yeah,
it's been forgotten about.
That's on Apple TV now, and I wonder if the extended one's on. Anyway, yeah, that's
Ferrari as well. That's been massively overlooked. Mm-hmm. I'm still watching Battlestar Galactica. Great. I have watched. Do you know what? I'm obsessed with Nevermind the Buzzcocks. I think that is the funniest TV show on TV. Like Greg Davis is the
new host. Yeah.
You should watch it. Honestly, it's on Now TV. It's genuinely like I am like it's side-splittingly funny all the way through. So Nevermind the Buzzcocks. Check that out. It's just a host game show, not game show. No, it's not.
No, it's like a talk show kind of.
It's a talk show about music, and it's also got doesn't matter, does it? Heads fried. Anyway, John, we're here to
really important news before we talk about
have we
Dune 2 It's so important, guys. Finally,
Oh, here we go. I know what it is already. I
they're
know what it
filming
is already.
Euphoria season 3. They're filming Euphoria season 3. I'm so excited. I haven't seen if Marcel Rev is back, which is my number one priority. Is like I love his cinematography. I think it's amazing. He's had another show out on Apple recently, which I'm trying to watch, but it's a horror, and I'm really like tentative about going for it. But,
What is it?
I've forgotten the name of it, but I will speak to you about it another time. Maybe we can watch it together. But yeah, it's I think Sydney Sweeney's been asked about it while she's been doing her press screenings for her new film, and she said she's returning soon, as is Zendaya and co. So, as you can imagine, I'm super excited. I will leave it there because there's not much else to say.
Speaking of Zendaya,
exactly.
She's in a film that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, this is a spoiler cast, so if you don't know what that means, let me tell you. Paul dies at the end. Joking, he doesn't. Or he might, who knows. But a spoiler cast, we're going to spoil the hell out of Dune Part 2. This is directed again by Denis Villeneuve. Will he return for Part 3, 4 and 5? Who knows? It's a 2024 film.
This world is beyond cruelty. You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades. My family's been fighting them for centuries. They were massacred alongside my father.
Your father didn't believe in revenge. We believe in Fremen.
Let me fight beside you.
So, on that question about 3, 4, 5, the plan is for this to be a trilogy. And
Okay.
Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. And, like, this film has covered up to the point where it kind of ends around where Dune Messiah would begin. Dune Messiah is about, like, the aftermath of this film. So we'll get into plot and that kind of thing. But just so people have an idea, Denny wants to make it, but he's also talked about the fact that he's been working on Dune films now for such a long period of time, he might need a palate cleanser in between. And actually, the plot of Dune Messiah is 15 years after anyway. So I'm not saying he's going to wait 15 years, but I'm saying if he does 2 years on another project and then does 2 years and come back, I think it'll be fine. I think it might actually grow the appetite. And
I'm a fan of that because like I don't like it when directors get tied up in stuff. So like Nolan, for example, when he was tied up in The Dark Knight for ages and ages, and especially something like Dune, which does take quite a long time to make. This one, it literally we arrive. This is best. We would agree, right, that Dune 1 is Dune Part. I'm going to call them Dune 1 and 2, right?
Yeah, do it for ease.
Everyone knows what I mean. You know what I mean. So you would say like Dune 1. We see Dune 1 that happens, and then literally it's really important to probably watch that and then immediately watch this after because it like picks up like hours later, essentially from where we're at. And this is basically the destruction. We've seen the destruction of House Atreides by the Harkonnens. We've got Paul Atreides and his mother on the run essentially, and they have joined the Fremen who are headed by Chani, who is played by Zendaya.
Kind of more so Stilgar's kind of the leader, I'd say.
Is it Stilgar?
Stilgar, yeah. And,
Stilgar, he's the leader, yeah.
And essentially, I'm guessing you guys have already watched Dune, but the basic thing is they're on Arrakis. Arrakis is a very popular planet because it has spice. Spice is basically the fuel or the oil. It's essentially very much talking about people going and invading places for oil.
It enables intergalactic space travel.
Yeah, and it's basically talking about the ideas of prophecy and how prophecy was used to give the Fremen hope of like their lives and their well-being better. But essentially, the film is about Paul Atreides, Timothée Chalamet's character, coming to terms with this because he doesn't believe he's a Messiah at any point, but half the Fremen believe he is the Messiah, half don't, and it's kind of like the film is he's performing all these feats, which can be explained, but it's that kind of do you believe or don't you kind of thing. And by the end of the film, he realizes that he sees, because obviously he's a Bene Gesserit. Bene Gesserit are the people that can kind of see parts of the future and that kind of thing, and his mom is also one of them, and she talked about in the previous film like his destiny and what it was, and about essentially him trying to become the emperor. And he was like, I have no interest. And then there's literally, we'll get into it, a point in this film where it flips from being like, I'm not a Messiah, I don't want to be a Messiah, I want to be a Fremen. But it's like, he has an experience which basically establishes, a bit like in Endgame, you know, when Doctor Strange says, I've seen 1 million outcomes and this is the only way that works, so we have to do it.
He can see like multiple futures,
possible futures, and essentially he's like, the only way for me to achieve my goal, which is to avenge his father and to free the Fremen, like, you know, and
but he wants revenge,
mainly, and the only way to do that is to become their messianic figure. And the whole interest of the film for me, and not just because of Euphoria, is, and the person who does the most heavy lifting in this film is Zendaya, because
100%.
It's about Chani and Paul's relationship, and about the fact of she loves him and wants him to be one of the Fremen, and they talk about how the Fremen men and women are equal. We don't care about House of Atreides or like these, like the previous things we've seen in the last film. Like, we just all want to be as one. And you see all the disruption that comes from all the outside worlders. Like, the Fremen don't really have any issues amongst themselves. They're not fighting each other. All their issues is from people from the outside coming in, trying to take their resources and their spice. That's literally every problem they have. And yeah, the most interesting parts of the film for me were watching Zendaya's character Chani, how her relationship with Paul changes throughout the film, because she wants him to become accepted by the Fremen, but she realises there's a key moment, we'll get into it, where she's like, they're not just accepting him, they are now worshipping him because they believe he's carried out this messianic feat. And that's when she worries, because she's like, if he picks this up, you know, the Fremen should be led by one of their own, is her belief, and that, you know, it should be their destiny and up to them. And although she loves Paul, like, he's not one of them, and she doesn't want someone to come and the film, it's a lot to get into. I remember when we did the first one, it's a lot to cover, but essentially in the first film,
by the way, I remember distinctively saying how well you, because usually it's me that talks about the synopsis, but you somehow,
Dune, there's something,
you've got it, man. Like, you've got it nailed, and you explain it so well. So I was like, yeah, and Cheney, like, and then thankfully you took over, because you can say it far more articulately than me.
I just I really love Dune and the world of Dune. I love all the inspiration it's had on science fiction around, which we briefly touched on last time. But yeah, the whole thing is essentially about interference and policy. I mean, if you want to be really political, it's kind of like BSG talks a lot about.
Sounds like my work.
It's like, it's going over like the war in Iraq and basically why you're going in, why you're meddling, and like. And the Emperor is played by Christopher Walken, and essentially at the start of the film you get your recap of film one, his daughter's Florence Pugh, and you find out basically that all the problems that they are having are from meddling with the different houses, because there's the House of Atreides, there's the Harkonnens, etc., and all of this interference, and basically for spice, because the film starts with the line, you know, if you control the spice, you control the universe, isn't it? Like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah.
So it's really hard to cover off, but yeah, the Bene Gesserit, which are the kind of like witches, I say, who Paul Atreides is a child of one, played by Rebecca Ferguson. That whole thing is they've set up this false prophecy for the Fremen over hundreds and hundreds of years, and now it's coming to pass, and it's about watching that happen. I find it utterly fascinating, because it's like, you can see why people who believe so desperately or want something to believe would fall for him as a messianic figure, but you can also see why other people clearly don't believe, because they know essentially that Arrakis is such a valuable proposition as a planet because of its worth to the universe, literally the entire universe, that you can see why some of the outsiders or Westerners or whatever they call them would want to come in and steal from them and set up a false prophecy to rule from there. But the film for me is very much split in two halves. The start of the film is Paul wanting to be accepted as a Fremen. He gets a Fremen name, which I actually can't remember now off the top of my head. And then by the middle of the film, there's a key section where he basically goes from being like, right, I've seen this one outcome, I'm going to commit to it hard. and he just goes on an absolute detour. I think some people thought this was a hero's journey from the first film, and I don't think they've realised, like, this is basically, Frank Herbert really wanted people to know, like, this is about an anti-hero and about why people shouldn't mess with, like, governments, societies, and how it can destroy, like, communities and what happens from that. Because essentially, like, what happened, Paul talks about, he has all these visions of, like, if I say I'm the Messiah, there's going to be a war for like 15 years and billions will die because religion previously has caused, and unfortunately still cause wars. Like, it's, you know, it's a divisive thing, and essentially he knows that, and he tries to avoid it at all costs until he realises he has to accept it to suit his own gain, which again just shows the selfishness of it. But people think because it's Timothée Chalamet and whatever, like, he's a good person, but Paul Atreides isn't a good guy.
I think that's kind of, so from what I understand. So it's weird because I'm a big fan of fantasy novels, sci-fi novels. So, and this is one that I just haven't read for whatever reason. I don't know why. I know you've read the first one, John, haven't you? So I know that the books are, so there's essentially two trilogies. There is Dune, then you've got Dune Messiah, then you've got Children of Dune, and then unfortunately Frank Herbert died, and I think his son, I want to say James Herbert, but I think maybe I'm getting mixed up with another. Can you just check that, John? But yeah, so his son basically continued the books, and the conclusion wasn't ideal or what people wanted. But the problem was that Brian Herbert, James Herbert's a horror author, I think. The problem was that after Dune, Frank Herbert wasn't satisfied with how people viewed Paul Atreides. Like, they kind of seen him as, like, a positive messianic figure, and actually the point Herbert, of the whole
it was like, no,
the point of the story is no. So he wrote, which is Messiah. Kind of like an epilogue almost. Like, it's quite a small book, really. Like, I want to say 250 pages. Dune Messiah, which was kind of then explaining in detail, listen, dummies, like, the point is that he's bad, like, he's not good. So so Film Forager writes in and says, is Paul becoming a baddie, or will he snap out of it? I mean, I've not read the books, but from speculation, I do feel like, yes, he is becoming a baddie. There's also been lots of things that have been changed in the film. For example, actually at the end of the film, when we see the fight, which is actually, like, there's some really we're going to talk about, like, by the way, I love this film.
Yes,
we're going to talk about some, like, really like exhilarating moments in the film, and we've got Fade Rother, played by Austin Butler. You know, you've seen him. He's black and white. He's got that bald head, really scary.
Looks like the man out of Prometheus.
Yes, he does. He does. Yeah. So with that, actually, in the book, it's supposed to be Paul's sister, who's actually still unborn in the film, that fights him. She's actually played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who you see at the end, who will come to be a big character in the next few books.
So Denny's kind of gone. I watched an interview with him today, and he was talking through a scene, but he talked about, like, the process of adapting, and in the book, Rebecca Ferguson's character, I've forgotten her name when you say it, Jessica, which is Paul Atreides' mother, has I've forgotten her name now. Anna Taylor-Joy's character is called.
Don't ask me. Sister. She's barely in the book.
She's born when they're in the desert with the Fremen.
Yeah.
And, like, she talks about the film, but, like, obviously they've changed that, and I'm not 100% sure why that decision was made, but I don't think it particularly hurts the film. I think Denny's done a really good job of kind of, or I thought he had until we had some questions on the pod today, actually, which we'll get into, but I thought he did a good job of depicting this isn't a good person and, like, watching his decline, rather than, like...
I can see why people would see it that way, because it's kind of like...
It's morally vague, or, like,
it's a little bit vague. Like, and it's a bit grey, I think. So anyway, Movie Scenes and Shit writes in and says, couldn't fit in a box, so I'll put it here. I know it's purposefully not a hero's story, but it doesn't work for me. People compare it to Star Wars, but imagine if in Empire Strikes Back, Luke switched to Sith out of the blue. see what you did there, out of the blue as blue lightsaber, or if in the or if in the prequel trilogy, Anakin switches to the dark side without any of the scenes between him and Palpatine. I get that it's his destiny or whatever, but he spends 2 movies wanting nothing to do with being a Messiah, then does a 180 out of nowhere. Now,
I think you're confusing the messianic part with the Emperor part and the revenge plot. So the Messiah, him accepting the role as Messiah, which he's ignored, is only a tool for him to gain power. He doesn't believe he's the Messiah. He is essentially using that as a propaganda PR piece to enable him to have the power to overthrow the Emperor. So that's the clear distinction, which I don't think may have been lost.
But also, I do think that it could be seen as grey. I didn't see it as grey personally. It could be seen as grey, the fact that because in the background we're always thinking that Paul could be doing this just to gain power, but I actually think that the way we see him, like when he joins up with the Fremen in the caves and he's like rah, like, and he's shouting his god name or whatever it is, I am Messiah. Yeah, when he's shouting all that, there is something very sinister about that, and he has
his like Bene Gesserit voice almost as well, like the low deep
so
one.
I actually think that's where. Yeah, so I do have a few issues with this film. I do not think it's the greatest sci-fi film or anywhere near what people think it is. Like, I think I don't think it's as good as the first. I think it's very, very good, and I loved it, and I love it, by the way. But I am allowed to criticize it as well. Sitting at an 8.8 on IMDb, and it's sitting at if I want to say 4.5 on, it's sitting at 4.5 on Letterboxd, which is extremely high. Like, everyone is like 5-star this, 5-star that, and I'm just like, what? Because I do think it has a few issues. There is, I do find some of it quite rushed. I think I have. It's funny because people are going to be like, "What are you talking about, Jamie?"
It's hard because it's a 2-hour 45-minute film, and they've got such a breadth of plot. And my takeaway, having read the book, was they did a very good job at being like, we don't need to watch Paul training to go on the sandworm, because it's actually a more effective reveal when he does that first time. So I think they do good. Denny does a good job of kind of knowing what to include and what not to include. However, I think I watched a review talking about how the first film has quite a serene pace, and like there's lots of different planets, but actually it's like quite a nice, smooth pace. And then this film feels a bit like whoa, because it cuts a lot more. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot of plot, and far more set pieces happen. So I understand that criticism, but I think the way they've condensed the time for the film, because I don't think there is enough plot to have Dune Part 2, Part 1, Part 2. Do you know what I mean?
Thank God they didn't do that, because we criticised Hunger Games for that last week, which is fine. And I think that things do feel rushed. And do you know what? I'm going to give it the same criticism as I gave Rebel Moon, which people are going to love. My 2 main criticisms, and the reason why I don't think it's the greatest sci-fi film ever made, and I do want to talk about recency bias in a minute because someone has written in. I do think it feels a little bit rushed. It feels like I don't even know what's going on with Jessica. Like, she's like kind of like all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you're the mother of like whatever, and she drinks the blue stuff, nearly dies, and then becomes the new mother for some reason, really quickly. I just found that a bit weird how they would trust her with that, and they just, and I know like there's a prophecy.
Wasn't that only because she's a Bene Gesserit, so she was the only one there to take that role?
Maybe I'm not understanding it properly, but
I don't know. My interpretation, I can't remember from the book. So my interpretation was, she's been accepted on the basis of she is a Bene Gesserit, so she has powers and like
that's fine, and
sees more so. And
my point is, you can't remember for the books. You shouldn't have to know the books to know the film.
The other part of that is you've got to think as well that where that takes place is in the south, which is where the Fremen do believe in the prophecy, or majority do. So it's more likely that they would then carry out what they carry out on.
Well, so there's that, and then I feel like it's like we all of a sudden. So it's explained better in the books, so I believe, because I did have to look. I did look at the differences between the book and the film. Yeah, I had to, because there was some bits I was confused about. Paul's like, bearing in mind he's been with the Fremen for a few hours at this point. Then all of a sudden, we just see the Fremen going on loads of these takedown missions of the Harkonnens harvesting spice. And we just see them like all of a sudden with big lasers taking down like these massive. And by the way, those scenes are exhilarating. They're brilliant. They're so well done. But I would have liked to just see some kind of planning or some kind of bit where someone says to me, yeah, this is the plan. We need to start like hurting the Harkonnens here, and here.
So,
but there's none of that. But I know why, by the way. So apparently it's because Paul, the reason why they're so good at taking down the Harkonnens is because Paul can foresee all the things that they're going to do, so he then intercepts it, and that's why it's so easy for them. I didn't know that without researching it.
But I would say in the previous film, and again, this is that whole, if you've watched the first one before fairly recently, they talk about how the Fremen, even when the Atreides family went down, the Fremen were already taking down, whenever outside worlders come, they always destroy the invaders, basically come into their space and territory. Paul is a benefit, but like they were already essentially freedom fighters beforehand, or terrorists, like depending on your point of view. But like
they were like
and essentially Paul is just giving them more of a skill set towards that. So again, it's hard because it's like, I know what you're saying about the plan, but what I like about Dune personally is it doesn't over-explain itself. It kind of just naturally seems to flow, and I feel like even in the way it's shot, which we'll get into, and the story delivery. So, you said, it's been a few hours. It's not. The whole point is it's been months, but I suppose it's not abundantly clear it's been months, but he's been trained over months and months and months, and it's hard to show that passage of time because it's the argument of, a lot of people say one of the most perfect science fiction films is Empire Strikes Back, but it's the argument of how did Luke do all that training in like a day? And it's like, oh no, it wasn't a day. He was on Dagobah for months. And then people get into the interstellar thing about like how many years is it between this planet and that planet, and like I don't care. Like it's I don't really want it to say 365 days later or whatever. Which I suppose they could.
Nor do I. Nor do I, because
it's striking that balance, isn't it?
Yeah. All I'm saying is like, and by the way, like I think the films are solid 8 to 8.5.
I'm just playing devil's advocate, by the way. I think some of it's absolutely fair, but I think it's interesting to look at it from the other perspective as well. I mean, there's some bits I don't like about it, which you may enjoy. So
my only other criticism was the one that I made about Rebel Moon, where again, this was made for $190 million. I do think that there has been some money saving exercises in terms of how they show all the different places. So again, it felt like, just like Rebel Moon, the different places. So the place where
Florence Pugh is.
Yeah. So it just shows a really small. It's like, a bit of greenery, a garden. That's it. We don't see any of that. And then you see there's the other bits where you see the Harkonnens, and it's just like lines of like.
Mate, you see, I'm not having it for the Harkonnen. I think you see loads for that.
Nah, I don't think so.
If you look at that, you've got the arena sequence they have,
which again, just a little. Incredible. That's it's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's just set piece. It's all it is a little arena. That's all you see, and the rooms are like very bland, like
ginormous arena. The whole point of their culture though is it's very like industrial, and it's got the Giga kind of look, like Giga whatever. When it's kind of like biomechanical, where everything's like curved and like just grim.
Yeah, but, I mean, maybe that's just. But look, maybe that is just.
I didn't agree on that one. The Florence Pugh and the Emperor one I kind of get, but everywhere else I didn't agree with. And like when it came to the we had those brilliant sets in the first film for when the Atreides were initially taken down in that building, and like
that was great.
Those sets were used. But yeah, it's I get what you're saying, but I think overall, the reason people go for this so much is it's one of the most visually stunning science fiction films ever made. Dune Part 1 was already, and this is again more of the same on that, and with better action, because actually ironically in the first film, apart from the initial attack and like when the Atreides are taken down, it's not really an action heavy film. Like it's not really designed to be. It's not Star Wars, and it's a bit like I think it's not really the point of it. Like the action just happens to take part of it, and in this film, when the action takes place, it's very much the opposite of in superhero films or even like in Snyder movies, where it's doing the slow motion and making points of moments. It's almost shot. It's not shot like documentary because it hasn't got the crash scenes and stuff, but it just looks like it's happening in front of you. And like things get in the way of the camera. So like if they're taking down a walker or whatever they're called, or like the legs of that will go in front and like block the camera. And it's the thing we talked about with Jurassic Park. Why is the first one so much better than Jurassic World or whatever? And it was like, oh, because they've blocked it to be shot from the human's perspective, as if you're actually trying to film it, rather than going from, look at this massive CGI spectacle. And if you look at certain parts of the prequels, the reason your brain registers it's not right is because like a camera couldn't go there and that take can't be that long.
Yeah.
And what this does is the opposite, is it makes it all feel so real. And the other element of it, which Jamie briefly touched upon, is the fact it's all shot digitally, and they then.
Oh no, I think we spoke about that privately.
Oh, did we? Sorry. So
I've not mentioned it on the pod.
The film's shot digitally, and then it's put onto a 35mm print, and then scanned back in digital. So you get the benefits of digital, which is the workflow and the fact it's so easy to record, and like data management and all those things, and like grading and the whole process with getting CGI in and all those things. But you also get the bonus of you get that natural film grain and that look. And they also said they initially tried for, Dune Part 1 to shoot it on film, and they said it looked almost like too classical. It didn't look quite right. But yeah, love it. Absolutely love it.
You do love it, didn't you?
We should discuss maybe some key sequences, because it's probably hard to go. I think we've done a pretty good job, general overview of the plot. But so the first key sequence that comes to mind for me is, we get the wrap up from Florence Pugh telling us what happened in the previous film, which is a bit annoying, but it's needed because they said the studio wanted it to still appeal to people who hadn't seen the first one, which is hilarious, because I think if you have not seen Dune 1, this is absolutely going over your head, to be honest. But
I think there's a big time.
Imagine dipping in here being like, oh yeah, can't wait to go on that. So there we are. And then my main criticism of this film is the casting choice for the Emperor. Christopher Walken is in it, and he's still
I don't know why he's in it.
His mad kind of got out of bed hair, and his accent is still the same. There's no attempt of kind of, sometimes in science fiction we've talked about this, you kind of do like an English accent or like kind of a kind of nondescript whatever, and we don't have that, and it just doesn't sit with me. Like, it just kind of felt it's just Christopher Walken, and I feel like I'm not the only person who's made this observation, sorry, but yeah, it's not for me. And again, it's interesting when you meet the Emperor, because in the first film, Baron Harkonnen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, is very much, this is the bad guy, but like, he's on the orders of the Emperor, which is Christopher Walken. So it's kind of giving you the idea of some of the most evil people are the ones in the shadows, or the people that seem not as evil. So like Harkonnen's very like visually brutish and like offensive is the way I go, but like the Emperor looks very unassuming, and like he couldn't do something like that. A bit like Palpatine in Star Wars. Like, again, like there are mirrors to like where these ideas came from. So I found that interesting. But yeah, I that's the scene where Jamie said he thought set wise it felt a little small, and I completely understand that. However, when we get into the first shots in the desert, love it. So I believe it was filmed in, was it Dubai?
Dubai, I'm sure it was Dubai.
And Denis Villeneuve had very specific things he wanted to do. So he shot all the desert sequences with natural light. So normally, and this is something like The Revenant did back in the day, I think they only had one sequence, which they didn't do this. So essentially, they're having to wait for the sun to go in the right place, because if you have two people talking to each other and they're looking at each other and you're doing a shot reverse shot, in films you'll have the backlight to you because it looks cinematic. So you're waiting, the sun is naturally not in the right place between the two shots, but it looks right on camera. So like planning all that must have been a nightmare. But he said he thinks it makes better integration for the stunts and the CGI. He just felt like it looks better when the natural light is used and it gives you something more authentic. And then when we've got things like the first ride of the Sandworm, which is kind of, you know, Paul Atreides saying to everyone, I am one with the Fremen because I'm able to achieve this feat. And it's like one of the biggest ones they've ever seen. It's a grandfather one.
Yeah.
So how this was shot was really interesting. I watched a breakdown of it today. Check it out. I think it's Vanity Fair's kind of a scene breakdown with Denny. And he talked about how they just had this massive rig which is like the skin of like the sandworm, and like what they had to do to perform the movements on it, and it's on this massive gimbal. And he talked about the camera tricks they use to like give the sensation of speed. So like if you use a telephoto lens, which is like a big zoom lens, and you have it zoomed all the way in, if something moves by and you move at the same time, it looks like it's traveling a lot faster than it is. So they had to like learn the speeds of like how quick can the truck go pulling that, and how quick can we do this, and then obviously digitally you remove the cars around it and then extend it out. But it's just really like, Denny's got a great, I'm talking about it as if he's my best mate, but he's just got such a good way of integrating practical and special effects and CGI, because people are obsessed with this whole no CGI phase and it's all BS. That's a chat for another day. But people, by the way, in the Barbie behind the scenes, any sequences which have blue screen, they're keying them out for the behind the scenes stuff and adding the background in to make people think it's not blue screen. Absolutely mental. Anyway, right. Honestly, this is true. There's a whole video about like all these things that I've been doing. It's absolutely nuts. Anyway, so seeing the way they're integrated in this film, I think is incredible. And I also think my bias to Ridley would be Prometheus does it fantastically well as well. I think Prometheus is one of the best looking science fiction films ever made. Yeah. And it's got flaws. And I think Dune with Denny, Blade Runner 2049 as well, and this now part 2. It just feels so tactile and tangible and real, and it's so amazing to just enjoy. The next thing I was going to go into, if it's okay, was kind of when we first meet Austin Butler's character and we see Fade Rowther. So in the previous film, Dave Bautista is set up as like Beast Raban, and like no one can beat him. Like he's a big bad guy, and like he smashes and caves someone's head in because they disagree with him in this film. And then you see basically immediately how scared he is of his nephew. Is it nephew or cousin?
I'm sure it's his,
Excuse me. And it's such a good setup for, my God, like, he's an absolute nutter.
Savage.
So if he's scared of him, then, like there's problems coming, and he makes him kiss his feet. So,
oh God, do you know what? That's such
great sequence.
That sequence is like really quite unnerving. You're like, oh my God, like he literally does, because you're like, Batista is formidable.
Yeah, he's
isn't he?
Tank, isn't he?
Yeah.
So before this, we kind of get introduced to Fade Rowther has many wives, and he feeds them like liver and flesh and all this stuff, and it's
From
really
people.
Creepy. And we find out he killed his mother, so he's got some issues. But the sequence where we're introduced to him in the arena is great, because there's a celebration for the Harkonnens. I think it's so many years of power or whatever. And the guy who's the doctor in the first film is the person who was the mole who set the Atreides up for the fall of the Atreides.
Yeah.
It was to save his daughter and his wife, but I don't know if they're even still alive. It's not established in this film. And essentially, all the people that Fade Rowther fights in this arena are drugged leftovers from the House of Atreides, and it's so unfair. Like, they can barely walk, and he's just there like killing them.
Very much like that scene in Gladiator, you know, when Commodus drugs Maximus.
And then you've got this guy, I've forgotten his name, the doctor's name, who's not drugged, and he gives him a run for his money, and they have a proper fight. But there's that moment where Fade Rowther looks up at Baron Harkonnen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, to say, as if like you're trying to kill me off. And Skarsgård's character's like, no, I just want to see who you really are, and all this stuff. So you get some cool sequences. It's visually incredible because the Harkonnens planet has a black sun. So one of my favourite sequences in the first film is the whole and it was like raining, and you see the blood of their victims going into the rivers, and it was like such an amazing setup of like this terrible army or whatever. And then kind of getting the more of that, and seeing like the Harkonnens' home world, and it's like black sun, misery, and
it's black and white.
It's black and white essentially. If you love Oppenheimer, you'll like this. So
no, that's like I say, like the surprising thing with Denis is like, I'm sure that he's quoted as saying that, I'm sure he's quoted as saying that his most interesting bits that he loves to do are like the human bits, the kind of the quiet pieces. But he's so good at those. Like, when I think of Denis Villeneuve, I don't associate him with amazing fight scenes, but we can associate him with great fight scenes, because the one at the end of Dune Part 1, with Paul, the one at the end of Dune Part 2 with Paul and Rafe, whatever his name is. They've all got crazy names. Do you know what?
Aid Ralpha.
Do you know what? I'm going back on what I said. I wish they were all called like Paul and Brian, because it'd just be so much easier to talk about here. But yeah, the one at the end with Paul and Rave White, well, whatever his name is, is just like, I remember I was in the cinema and I was like, I was literally gripping the chair. I was like, this is so tense right now. And he's just, he's very good at the human moments, especially with this like love story with Zendaya and Timothée, Chani and Paul. There's some really sweet moments, but at the same time, like he really knows how to direct a fight scene or an action scene and give it just this incredible scale, which I've spoken about time and time again on this pod. How he says one of his favorite shots was just a speck. When Paul goes to call the grandfather worm, just a speck of human on this huge sand dune. He said that's one of his favorite shots because it shows how like insignificant
Paul is in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme of like how big this desert is. So and the way they build up, the one thing I would say that is good, like I would criticize some of it for being rushed. The way they build Fade, Ralph's character, played by Austin Butler, they build his character. And they set him up. It reminded me a lot of Darth Maul, actually, which is funny. But it really reminded me of Darth Maul.
We shall reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last, we shall have revenge.
There we go. But it reminded me of that because I remember you think when Darth Maul first arrives, you're like, oh my god, he's terrifying. Like, and this guy's the same. Like
you're like, I can't wait to see this guy in action, and then you see him in action, and you're like, well, actually, I'm not so keen because Fade Ralph is a complete psychopath. I was going to say, Denny talks a lot in that interview about Zendaya and how he doesn't say like she does all the heavy lifting, like, which is what we joke, because the whole film is about her reaction and like watching Paul try and relate to the Fremen and how he gets in with them. And she has a friend who's not at the top of my IMDb, Shishakli, who is one of the Fremen.
Shishakli,
who doesn't believe, and she's not from the south. So you have Fremen from the north, Fremen from the south. South are more like to believe in the prophecy. From the north are more critical and don't believe in it. And you see Zendaya's and Chani's reaction, kind of, she's like crestfallen by the time that her friend believes, because like before she was so ardent, like it's not a thing, and like the fact that it's starting to sway those people is when she's like, oh god, like this isn't good, because she doesn't believe, and she knows that the truth is Paul doesn't believe either. And let me talk about like this. So sorry, Denny said that Zendaya's fantastic at acting with her eyes. He's like, it's not the lines she says.
I've said this myself.
Said it from Euphoria, mate, but like genuinely. But just like honestly, she's won so many awards. I genuinely think she's an incredible actress. And I know Mr. and Mrs. I say this every time. It's not called Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Can I just say? My review, which was on the 14th of March, I said, this is a fantastic sci-fi epic that at times feels like the locations are just that, locations, and sets that are not part of a larger world. Zendaya is the star for me, saying everything with her face whilst not having much to say. And she does. She's so good at that subtlety with her eyes. You can kind of see that she shows hurt so well. And I do think she's learned a lot of that from Euphoria.
I think it's just she's so
developed it. She's
brilliant at kind of having that vulnerability. So she's initially hard Fremen, I'm not going to make friends with this guy. Then it becomes like, I do quite like him, I'm going to help show him the ways. Then it becomes her saying, you're never going to leave me, are you? And you can see she's like essentially really vulnerable, and she's kind of, I've opened up, I don't want to be shafted. And he says, I'll love you until my last breath. Now, this is what I wanted to talk about. In the film, there's this whole plot, which is when they drink the life of the sandworms, and it allows them to have these visions. So his mum does it first, Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, and she starts to have the visions, and she gets really into this mad Bene Gesserit kind of like visions of the future, seeing the pattern of what's going to happen. And then Paul later in the film goes through a similar thing. They're like, if he survives this, he is the Messiah. They have quite a few things, but this is like the final one. But then Chani's thing, it means, is it raindrop or teardrop? But there's a link to, in the prophecy it says, if she cries on Paul, if she cries on the Messiah, it will bring him to life. You need the tear of I think he's a non-believer, essentially. and that is what happens. But what I was going to say is my read on the film initially was he loves her till his last breath. You could argue
That's what you keep saying, yeah.
But you could argue that was his last breath, and then he's brought back to life. Because when he's brought back to life, he's kind of off with Channing.
Oh, look at John with the deep cuts. That's a really good.
After he wakes up is when he has his, like, I'd say again, Doctor Strange moment. This is the way I've got to do it. I've got to say I'm Messiah. Sod everything I've said to Channing. I've basically said to her, I won't do this because I don't want to, I don't want to upset you, and I don't want any of this responsibility.
Yeah.
And then after he's woken up from that, he's like, nah, sod it, I'll do it. And when
That was his last breath, wasn't it? You're right. I think you're right, John. You're on something.
He calls that.
We've been movies in a pod shell. See you next week.
And then when he calls the challenge to the Emperor, which is, come here and let's see what happens, basically. So
yeah.
The Harkonnens are there, the Emperor's there, and the people from the other worlds. And the Emperor's army are the ones that get that amazing fight sequence in the first film where they come in really coolly and then they land really quietly, and then they've got their swords and essentially there's a massive fight between the believers, the Fremen believers, and the Emperor's army and some of the Harkonnens, and it's watching that all unfurl. And it's breathtaking, like it is incredible, well directed. It reminded me of Lord of the Rings vibes, which sounds mad when they're completely not related in terms of like eras, but in terms of the scale and like how it made me feel and the fact that I actually care about the outcome of what's happening. But what I was going to say was after that, after Paul's woken up, he basically goes in and says, I am the Messiah, and then there's like non-believers in there, and he's basically screaming at them, being like, you have a brother, and your brother died, and like this happened. Then he goes to someone else. He's basically like, you don't believe, but if you did believe, you believe I did this. So I'm doing this, and like his voice just like it's brilliant from Timothée Chalamet. Like credit where credit's due. Like he becomes it's not like the Dark Knight voice, but that kind of his presence becomes massive, and you're saying like shit. Like he
essentially becomes a medium in that point, doesn't he? Do you reckon he's faking it? Like mediums are like
because he sees potential outcomes, though, doesn't he? Like his whole thing is potential outcomes. So I think he's using that. But you're talking about like in Phoenix,
the South Park episode where he's like, where they're like, he's like, I'm getting someone's name beginning with the letter C, and people are like, my mom's name is Caroline, like, and like that's what it's like. He's like clutching his jaws, but no.
Paul does more of a like, I know about what happened with your sister, like that kind of like direct stuff. And then you see Channing's reaction because basically all the Fremen go from like to going down on their knees and like bowing, and she's refusing. And Gurney Halleck at this point's been like. We haven't really talked about him, but Josh Brolin's character Gurney Halleck survives the first film. He was the guy who trained Paul Atreides, and he essentially now like has to work for Paul because Paul is his master. And it's Gurney Halleck says to him, if you have to become the Messiah and billions of people die in your vision, don't worry about it. Like if you can be like take full power and become the Emperor, just do it. And he's there with Channy saying like, get on your knees now. He's like, if you don't believe, like you're going to cause so much grief, like just get down and agree with this. The best part for me, and I love where this goes, is when it's devastating. Like Zendaya for me, there's so many sequences in my life I've watched where Zendaya does devastating acting, and I just kind of want to cry inside because I'm like, this is awful. Like the one I always give the example of is in Euphoria. There's a sequence where she thinks she's dancing with her dad, but she just actually hires a kite and there's no one there, and like it's like awful. There's a sequence where she's in remission essentially, and like she doesn't realize her friends are there when she's screaming about them, and like there's a horrendous sequence, and she's just brilliant at it. And in this, it's the moment where Paul literally, like, the Emperor's there and Florence Pugh's there because he's threatened to basically nuke them all. He's like, I've got the entire
I'm going to marry,
And he's like, I will become the Emperor and I will marry Princess Irulan, which is Florence Pugh. And, like, Channy's just there, like, what the actual... Like,
she's like, her eyes are like...
It's awful. And you see the reaction and you're like, oh my God. And she just does this... She's brilliant. She gets the anger and then the immediate hurt of, I'm just like a dog here. I've just been cast aside and I'm like the next best thing. Now, I know a bit about Dune Messiah and I kind of...
We shouldn't spoil that for people. Okay, fair. That's one thing I think we shouldn't do.
So, yeah, it's interesting, like, where they've left all that. And I kind of also... The film kind of feels like it ends open-ended because it's like a bit of a stalemate, like what's going to happen. And then Messiah's like 15 years ahead. So will it start immediately after, or will it have flashbacks, or like it'll be interesting to see how they play that. I'm intrigued to see what Denny does.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. So with these kind of things, I often think that like you do wonder whether Denny will carry it on, or it will be another director, because he might decide that he's going to obviously do some other things.
He wants to do it. He's basically said he wants to do it. He just wants to do something else in between. But he's been adamant it's Dune 1, 2, 3. He doesn't want to do 4, 5, 6.
No, because I think I do think they are terrible. When I say terrible, like they're just not on the same. They're not on the same quality.
The stories basically move to. Do you know what I'm not going to say, because to be fair, it will then kind of reveal where Messiah goes. So I won't get into it. But it's different character groups basically. So yeah, I think another sequence I really want to talk about quickly is when Fade Rowther is being seduced by Lea Seydoux, who plays Lady Margot Fenring, who is basically a Bene Gesserit who wants to
love Lea Seydoux, she's wicked.
She wants to keep the bloodline going. So she basically sleeps with him, and like he's a complete psycho. And she's like, I can manipulate him because he's got mummy issues. She basically just says that, and she's like, yeah. And the biggest plot reveal for me in this film that we find out is actually Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is actually the daughter of Stellan Skarsgård, Baron Harkonnen. Yes. And when Paul kind of finds this out, it's almost, again, when he's woken up and goes on this mad tangent, he's like, well, if I'm a Harkonnen...
essentially a Harkonnen.
He's like, if I am a Harkonnen, which he is, he's like, then I'm going to follow it one. And the Emperor says this great thing to him where he's like, do you know what the problem with your dad is? He basically says he was too nice. Like, he had no... He basically says to him, he didn't have the balls to carry through what he needs to.
Yeah,
he
called him weak. Yeah.
And he then gets this Bene Gesserit voice out and screams at them when they try and like overpower him, and he's like, silence! And it's just like mental. Love it. I just think what I love about it is you've got all this Shakespearean drama going on. I think the dialogue's really well done. None of it feels forced. It all feels like natural. And
I would say the dialogue's great.
Yeah, like, so well done.
No, and it really, really is. I think it's mostly personal preference in terms of like
pacing.
You split in hairs. Like I love the first one so much, and when I watched it again, and when I watch Dune Part 2 again, maybe I'll feel differently on that. I love the first one so much because of the world building, and obviously we know that world building isn't the same as plot. Sorry, that's just a little private joke.
We'll get into it
for someone that wanted to tell me about that. But yeah, so I find the world building in Dune Part 1 more exciting. I think by Part 2, the aesthetic is a little bit exhausting, like in terms of like
no.
Denny loves yellow and orange, like, and I know we're in the desert, so we can't get away from that.
And by the way, Messiah's not going to be much different. You're going to be on Arrakis, and it's going to be hot.
I know.
And
but I think but again, what I'm saying is it's personal preference. I just personally, I love the storyline of the Atreides, House of Atreides getting annihilated by Harkonnens, and then the introduction of all of these systems and the suits that like recycle the water, and the first like fight to the death.
The elements of it.
That's I think for me, like you'll never, and it's the same as Lord of the Rings. Like Fellowship of the Ring for me is my favorite. I think it's the best one. But then
I never felt that as a kid. That's the one apart from the DVD, I used to always repeat the Balrog's tomb. Sorry, the tomb with the Charles
shall not pass.
From when Pippin drops the bucket and the book down the well to the cave trial to then the Balrog. So that was like the bit on DVDs I used to do that. It was like that was a sequence I watched all the time. And then it was skipped to Aragorn doing the fight at the end when Frodo offers him the ring and he's like, "Nah, you're all right." And then Boromir
got it there.
Anyway,
got it in 4K.
Can I talk to you about Hans Zimmer? So I watched a great interview with him, and he was like, 6 months after the film had been released, June 1, he was still sending music to Denny.
Yes.
And Denny turned around and said,
I heard about this.
It's done. Stop sending me stuff. And he's like, no, like I'm still in the world and I've got this theme, and it's essentially Channy's love theme for Paul, and like it's been stuck in my head since I've seen it. I have also been listening to the soundtrack, and actually I find this one is easier to listen to than the first, because the first had the bagpipes and whatever. They weren't apparently bagpipes. They had bagpipes in the film, but like it was actually achieved on electric guitar with a sample. That's a chat for another day. But I love the fact that Hans Zimmer was just all over it. But I also thought he said something super interesting, was how fuming he was when, I forgot Dune was dual released on HBO Max, because it was like 2021.
Was it?
Coming out of COVID and all
Right.
that stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't think it was in the UK, but it was in America. And he was fuming because he said they'd sound mixed it for the cinema and they hadn't done a separate sound mix for a digital release.
No wonder
So-
he's fuming. Yeah.
So he said, I would have done different frequencies, I would have done this, done that. And it was really interesting hearing about that process. But anyway, I just love the fact that he was so invested in that world. He just kept going. But I've seen in interviews that Denny and Hans both loved the book before, and they were really nervous about taking it on.
Yeah.
And like Denny said, he feels like he's achieved a high percentage of what he saw in his head as a teenager. But there's always things that you can't quite get there. But I think it's close to like, it's if you said top 10 science fiction films ever made, I'm going to go that bold. I reckon like you could put at least Dune 1 in there, and also
I'd probably agree. Like, I'd probably
part
agree.
1, part 2, I would argue as well. I feel like part 1 and part 2, they are kind of the same film in the sense of like it's one continuing story. And like Denny said this, he was like, Messiah will be different because there's a time jump. Like there's 50, well in the book it's,
I'd agree
it's
with
15
you. Like,
years ahead. So like
I think it would be top 10 of all time. Like I would agree. Like,
and if you go from like 2000s onwards as well, so let's say like I say modern films, that's like a 24-year span now, which is terrifying. I
crazy.
would put like Prometheus for me is like one of the best looking ones, but it's got the flaws with some of the dialogue's not great, some of the choices of scientists and stuff people just
Blade
really-
Runner.
You've got Blade Runner
2049.
2049. I think,
Upgrade.
and then you've got
Upgrade.
Mm,
Upgrade.
you've got Arrival, which is also Denny's.
Matrix. Oh, is that 99? I think
Let's
Matrix is
classify
99.
it in, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the thing that what Dune nails for me is I love the world it's based in, but the fact it all feels tangible and real. And for something that's so
Rise of Skywalker
outlandish,
as well.
and also because it's got all those ideas of religion and like how religion can be used to control the masses, potentially for like negative effects and all those elements, it makes it really interesting. And also, unfortunately, there's parallels in our world now, which is probably why Frank Herbert wrote it the way he did. And that's just fascinating. And I think that's why Dune endures and will probably be adapted again in another 20, 30 years' time, because it's a story.
It's got a lot of like quite
relevant messaging to give, you know?
Yeah. And especially with like the messaging from when the book was written to now, whereas he's talking about like the Fremen, like men and women, equality, that kind of thing, like you're muted. Yeah, men and women.
They're all
like,
equal.
equality. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all equal. Yeah, it
was ahead of its
science.
time.
Yeah, and I think again now people probably still need to hear it. So it is. I agree. It is probably one of the top 10. I would also, but at the same time, there's been it's the recency bias is just out of control. Like Kim's.cinema. Oh, I got told I would mess it up, and I did. I think Film Forager said I would mess it up, and I have. Kims.horror.escape writes in, friend of the show, why do you think recency bias is so heightened these days, with people so quick to name new films as the best thing ever? Oh, do you know what, Kim? Like,
Easy answer on that, but
hold my beer, man. Like, because this is the one thing. So, I guess for me, it's important for us to yes, engage in Instagram and social media, because we have to stay relevant and to see what people are talking about, to see what's popular, so we can cover it, like Dune. And so what I hate as well is when, and the one thing, and maybe that's just because I'm a 35-year-old old man and I'm tired and I just want to rewatch Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger version. The problem I have now is that like a still image will get released or something and every single person is putting the same thing up and I'm just like, I'm done now. The problem with this, Dune Part 2, is that like people are like saying like, it's that, do you know, like when people get like a preview screening and on Twitter, like they'll write a Twitter thing and they'll say just all this generic shit. So like I once did one, right? I once did one as a joke, because I used to do like,
you did it for Marvel, didn't you? And
yeah, I did one for
off.
Marvel, like, and I put why Zack Snyder's Justice League is better than Marvel's Infinity War.
Good
the funniest
point.
thing was right, Justice League wasn't even out yet, so it was a joke, and I said like I was just saying stuff like Oh, because of like I can't remember what I was saying, but like it. Just go back and see it. It is quite funny. Some of my best work. I'm not saying that my work is good, but some of my best work. And I did the same. I did a similar thing with A24. Like why A24 films are like, because I also have a dislike at the way people treat A24. So we have to endure this, like, and be like, right, everyone's talking about Dune now. And by the way, it apparently is the best thing ever. That someone put a really popular Instagram account put up like the greatest sci-fi movie of all time, and I'm like, right,
2001: Space Odyssey.
So I haven't seen that. So
but it is
autumn, yeah, which is
down.
Okay,
but yeah,
right. That and people are gonna love that comment because I think you. Yeah, no, they will, like in a good way, because I love the fact that you said that, and you can. I feel like you are one of the people that I know and engage with often, that like there isn't many people out there that I know that know more about sci-fi than you do, in terms of
it is my thing. Yeah,
it's your thing. Like you read many books, you watch all the shite as well as the good stuff. So I feel like
sucker.
yeah, like it is your niche. Like, so what I can't stand is when someone is literally sitting in their chair, like, and again, I did put it on my review as well. I said, overall, it's a stunning visual spectacle and an intriguing plot with a few lines that will undoubtedly be immortalized over the next few years. But let's do that. Let's take a while to consider a film before calling it a masterpiece, whilst sitting in the chair at the cinema. So that, like, my main issue with this is that the credits are rolling and someone's sitting there like, best film ever. I'm like, can you just take 5 minutes to like allow it to resonate with you?
Can I flip side that? And I'm just
flip side it.
Let's all play devil's advocate. So when I saw Blade Runner 2049, I remember thinking, like, that's probably one of the best science fiction films ever made, which sounds mad, but like just in terms of production value, story, managing to make a sequel to a film which doesn't serve any form of sequel because it's kind of had no right to have any form of story continuation, and I thought it was incredible. But anyway, I feel like Jared Leto, we live in a world of divisive politics, and we've talked about this on the pod so many times. It's 1 star or it's 10 stars, or 1 or 5. There's no there's no in between. I mean, my God, when we gave Rebel Moon a middling review to 6
out of 10,
whatever,
6.5,
people were like castrating us because it was like, it's either 10 or it's 1. It's like, no, it's not. But anyway, I feel like that's a large part of it. Recency bias is very much a thing, which is actually why I tried not to talk to you about the film for a while. Wanted to digest it and just kind of see how I felt about it.
We didn't speak about it.
No, I saw it on the Sunday, and we're now recording on, what day is it?
Wednesday.
Oh wow, Wednesday. And I was trying to just kind of get my head around it a bit and just, see how I felt. And you kept saying to me like, "Oh, I think I prefer 1." So I was like, okay, like I'll mull with that. And no, I just
I'll mull with that.
No, but I just mean like I don't think I'm particularly one of those people that run. The only time I remember running out of something and then really regretting my thoughts about it was Force Awakens. Force Awakens, when I was there in the cinema, felt like the best time ever. And then after I got home, like a few days later, and realised that I just kind of watched A New Hope again, but it's
a trap.
Slightly different. I just felt kind of annoyed that I kind of been like mugged off, and and like, so I am aware of it, but I just feel like I think all of Denny's science fiction films are genuinely incredible, and I also love Sicario.
They are.
But I think they're fantastic filmmaking, and I also believe, and this may be controversial, there are a lot of bad films out there, and there's been a lot of guff this year, or and we've just come off the back of Sony's Madam Web, and that's had a lot of backlash for being how terrible that is, and the way it was made, and like studio interference and all these things.
Morbius, solid 6 out of 10 as well.
But and my point being, when people then see something which is actually very articulate and good, I think they then suddenly go, it's the best thing ever. And it's like, no, this is kind of the level we probably should be at. But, hey ho, we are where we are.
But with someone like Denis Villeneuve, like, it's what you expect, really. Like, and I do think that, like, actually, the one thing I would say, so, and I really don't want to come across like a prick, but it's hard not to when you are me. Like, John's like, I'm just gonna let him. I'm so glad he's finally said it after like 12
episodes,
14 years. No, I was on about like you knowing me. I don't want to come across like a prick, and as well, like I love when people enjoy stuff. I think that's the most important thing. Like, if people are in the cinema being like, that felt like a 5-star film to me, like, and I'm like, and I wouldn't disagree with people that are saying it's a 5-star film. If that's a 5-star film to you, that's fine. But to chuck like labels on it like 5 minutes after you've seen it, I would just say that people, and again, it's I do think it's the culture of like this like snapshot TikTok and like, oh, I'm going to say this and I'm going to watch this and this is 30 seconds and that, oh, I've got this opinion and everyone needs to know right now.
Do you remember the reactions of Rise of Skywalker where people say it was like the best film ever made in terms of because it appeased some fans, and then like people saw it and were like,
it's the worst Star Wars film.
Yeah, but it's that kind of thing, isn't it, where people just get caught up in the moment.
Yeah, so for me, like, I'm all I would say is that like it's really, so I think that like, that the answer to the question is that, Kim, that like it is because like we've got access to everyone else's opinions and everyone's hyping everyone up and everyone's like, it's like this circle jerk of like thing, like, and if you think it's a 5-star film, like, I'm buzzing for you, like, and it's nearly a 5-star for me, by the way, like I love it, but what I would say is probably like, and again, this is going to sound like I'm being a prick, watch more films, like try and watch more diverse films and watch more like different films and like that, rather than stay away from and try and stay away. Watch blockbusters because they're fine, and this is about as good as it gets in terms of This is a blockbuster. This is. Like,
I think that
this is what I get excited for. Like, this is what I go to the cinema for. Like, IMAX. I went to see it in IMAX. It's brilliant.
But the only thing I would say to that is, like, I think all of Denny's films, and I think Christopher Nolan has this tag as well. And I think Fincher used to have it when he was still doing cinema releases.
Yeah, when he wasn't like ball and chain to Netflix.
And kind of have that elevated sense of, I think Scorsese has it, I think Tarantino has it, elevated,
I think you're right,
elevated sense of story but a commercially accessible on the basis of the IP is the name of the director. I think enough people actually know who Denny is now. I would have thought probably not as much as Nolan.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
but I feel
what they need to do? They need to go and watch Polytechnic, because that's a Villeneuve film. That is a Villeneuve film.
I think. Last point on that as well. I think recency bias is always a thing. It's always existed, but as you said, with social media, it's even more so. But I do stand by. I think people have seen a lot of guff this year, and let's say people don't have a massive film catalogue to look at, and they do mainly go for blockbusters. This is such a cut above that. And let's be honest, this is better than any Disney Star Wars film, hands down.
Oh Christ! It's better than most. This will be one of the films of the year. Like, it's fantastic.
My point being to that, if that's kind of your normal bread and butter, or Marvel, not being harsh, or whatever, then you're going to see this.
Yeah, you are right.
And you'll be like,
right.
This is 5-star. It's like, this is like closer to a genuine 5-star. I think for me, if I was giving it a star rating, I normally do like out of 10, but like, I think it's probably 8.5, close to a 9. I don't really like giving anything top marks, because even when it comes to something like...
Agree, yeah.
We've talked about this before. Alien's kind of probably like up there for me as like one of the best films ever made in terms of production design, the way it's shot, acting, like all of it. But there's still the bit when the alien comes out and it like bangs off the ship and it looks like a bloke in a suit and it looks rubbish. So for that reason, as harsh as it is, like... I can't say it's a 10, because that bit always makes me kind of go...
I don't ever give things... I never give things a 10, because I just always think that there are films that are like extremely, extremely close. Like, it's just the way I am. But this is, I agree with you, 8.5, like, and I think I probably had slightly things that... And when I say problems, like, they're just minor little gripes, but I think you have hit the nail on the head. I think that for people out there that do just watch the big releases, this is going to blow you away.
It's a step above on pretty much every level. And
what I'd also say is, like, I started watching. Actually, I did forget to mention it. I've nearly finished it. I stayed up way past my bedtime last night. American Fiction, which we almost reviewed. I started watching American Fiction last night, which is a drama about a writer, and the writing's just like that's as good as Dune Part 2. But it's just completely different. So what I'd say is just, I don't know. It's a shame that I guess films like this is now sitting at a 4.5 or whatever and it's one of the highest rated films of all time on Letterboxd, and it's mad because there are other Oh, I don't know. I'm just rambling now.
Just
But there you go, Kim.
two things.
There you go.
Two things on that though. Right. So first of all, like some science fiction films are initially really poorly received and then get acclaim over time. So 2001 at the time was not particularly well received. It was actually quite middling, mixed reviews. And then years later, people saw it for what it was. And then Blade Runner, we've talked about this before, was a cult classic. Like it flopped and was like panned. And then people thought Harrison Ford was going to be doing this action thing like Star Wars, and then were very disappointed when it was a very depressing police procedural kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the first point, and I forgot what my second one is. Is what it is about audiences. Oh, I was going to say, I don't think we should. Some people like not everyone watches a massive breadth of film series. They might just go off latest releases. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Which is fine. Do what you want.
And I think that.
Those people won't be listening to this podcast because they won't care about films enough to find to listen to a podcast about them.
But what I was going to say is, if they watch a Denis Villeneuve film, I think they realise that it's a step up. And
I think if they should, oh God, imagine if they watch Prisoners. Christ Almighty, what a film!
I wanted to say, I feel like we're starting to wrap on Dune a little bit, but I want to kind of talk about one of the characters I missed out earlier was Javier Bardem plays Stilgar, which we talked about briefly. He is the driving force of someone who believes. So he's a Fremen from the south, and a lot of the relationship is he teaches Paul to ride the sandworm, and there's this constant relationship where he believes in him, but he's also quite hard on him initially because he wants it to be true, the prophecy, but he's kind of the Morpheus role. That kind of
but funnier.
Yeah, he is funnier.
He's got a few little funny quips.
And I really enjoyed watching that play out because Stilgar and Chani don't get on because Stilgar is a believer and Chani's not, and they believe in the Fremen values, but they disagree fundamentally on the religious aspect. The messianic figure. And I enjoy how that plays out. And I think he's just brilliant. And I enjoyed seeing some set photos of Javier Bardem with I've forgotten his name, Josh Brolin, and they said reunion from what's the film they did together with the money.
No Country for Old Men?
Is that it? When Javier Bardem's like that creepy guy going around killing everyone.
No Country for Old Men with the Coen brothers,
So that was cool. I think that's pretty much it from my perspective. Unless there's any more questions we need to answer.
We've got a couple more questions. I mean, you've pretty much you're good on these sci-fi episodes because you're very good at talking about all the different bits. The only other thing I would mention would be the sand when Paul does ride the sandworm for the first time. The way that is filmed, and again, I watched it in IMAX. It's just absolutely exhilarating.
And how much is done practically, or how much they try and capture in camera to mix with
use
CGI.
dust. They use tons of dust and blew it all over the place. I just think that kind of stuff is incredible, really. And I do think the film looks. There ain't many films that look better. This Greg Fraser man is unbelievable. I'd love to get him on the pod one day. Like I say, he responded to me and told me no.
He did all the detuning on the lenses for the Batman, which looked amazing. He's got a great diverse portfolio of just how he makes these films look, and love it. Sorry, next question.
But a couple of questions before we leave then. So we have David Ellis writes in, friend of the pod, mainstay, and he says, Sandworm or London Underground, which is more reliable and effective? Now, David, listen, I'm a real big. I live in Birmingham, but I shouldn't be telling anyone. But I don't really care. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Find me? Do you want me to tell you where I live? Doesn't matter.
Just listen for the sirens around Birmingham.
Basically, that's what. But what sort of sirens? Is it the police station, or is it the ambulance, or is it the fire station? Find me. Anyway, so. I used to hate London, but I'm a really, really big fan of London Underground. And at 35, I often talk about the incredible piece of engineering that London Underground is. And I never thought I would be this person. So whenever I'm in London and I'm like, let me tell you about the London Underground. It's there's a train every 2 to 3 minutes. And there's not really that. It's probably pretty dusty, to be fair, but not as dusty as a sandworm. And it's extremely reliable.
Can we talk about, when you see the mass groups on the sandworm, how are they getting on there? So there's a sequence where the Fremen are going down south,
idea.
and you see Rebecca Ferguson's character Jessica's in a little. It's like a cradle.
Oh
thing.
yeah, she's a little, yeah.
And then everyone else is kind of just like slumming it on the top. And there's about 30 people on there. And so you watch Paul run and jump onto a sandworm. Do all like 30 people just go at the same time and go woohoo or like jump or not? Just a question. I'm being an arse. Like there's no need. And the book I remember is very does not go into detail on it for that exact reason.
Not?
Probably
Funny that.
No. But I'd love to know how all those people get on because they keep. Do you remember there's a sequence where they're like, Lady Jessica, your worm is arriving. Like your worm is arriving and it'll be here so long. And I'm like, is she going to be running and jumping? Are you throwing her on or like with a baby or? Just a question. I mean, I'm being picky. I should stop. But
no, be picky what you want. And then, choose one role in either Dune Part 1 or 2 to recast and why? Well, I think we'd recast Christopher Walken, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and
quite easily.
In Part 1, this is controversial, and this character would play a big part in the next film potentially. I wasn't massively on board with. I need to go back to Dune 1's IMDb so I don't say the wrong character name. It's Jason Momoa's character.
Jason Momoa?
He plays. Do I mean Jason Momoa?
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays. Character name coming up. Sorry, guys, very bad prep on my parts. He plays Duncan Idaho, who's an important character and is a character in some shape or form who comes back into the picture. He essentially was a friend of Paul's / another kind of mentor figure. I like Jason Momoa, but I think it was around the time of Snyder Cut and that kind of thing, and I found it hard to separate him out personally. I'd have liked it to have been a bit more of an unknown, or Carl Urban is the one that sprung to mind, or
I like a bit of Carl Urban.
I love Carl Urban.
I seen a really funny meme earlier that says like how the difference between sci-fi and fantasy is Carl Urban with short hair and Carl Urban with long hair. Yeah. I'd be replacing Christopher Walken 100 million% with Donald Sutherland. %1,000,000.
That'd be very difficult because Donald Sutherland's not still alive, is he?
I think Donald Sutherland's alive.
I think he is.
I don't know about that. No, he is alive. He's 88. He's alive, mate. I mean, I hope he's alive. So if he's not, like, then R.I.P. And I'm pretty sure he's alive, though. So yeah, I'd probably replace him. I'd probably replace Timothée Chalamet just because, I don't know, I'd find someone that I prefer. But I will say that in this film, I like Timothée Chalamet. I think he's good. I think he's decent.
Do you know what was funny? Like, I'd seen Wonka, which I've talked about the pod before. I quite enjoyed. But when you've seen that, and then he's like serious Paul Atreides, it's like such a like juxtaposition, which is what actors should do, and it's great. But every so often, I was still thinking of 6 silver sovereigns in my pocket.
Yeah, man.
But no, loved it, and yeah, it's a 5. It's a 5 out of 5. No, I'm joking. No, really,
it's the greatest sci-fi film ever made.
I think no one can make that decision. Give it 10 years, and then we can have a chat about it. But
exactly. Just take time to consider it. Like we've done The Empire Strikes Back. Like it's had,
which was also, by the way, mixed reviews when it came out.
50 years we've had though to consider it, to think about it, and to realise why it's one of the greatest ever. We can't sit there while the credits are rolling and be like, greatest sci-fi film ever. Shut your mouth. Patch writes in for the last question of the day, and he says, are there still... Am I being bitter? Am I being bitter, John? Am I being a bit nasty?
Go on.
Shut your mouth. Patch writes in, he says, are there still unfilmable books, or can anything be adapted well by the right team with modern effects?
I don't think there's unfilmable books. I think
I'll tell you about an unfilmable book.
Whether it can be adapted enough in the time of the film, the runtime. So my biggest thing is I like when certain book series go to TV because you can flesh it out more and have the time. So, however, the sacrifice of that is you normally don't get the production value to be able to do that because of budget and what it costs. Excuse me. I think Dune was considered unfilmable for a long time, and I understand why. But now, I wouldn't say it's easy to achieve, but it's something that can be done. Obviously, as we've got 2 of them now. But I think the unfilmable aspect might be more trying to get across to the audience a lore-heavy production. Some fantasy is so rich in depth.
Yeah, so
trying
do you know
to
what?
get it
Like,
over and then not be in trouble for, you know, starting with a voiceover or with a, in a world where da 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 da.
yeah. The one thing I will say, if there are people out there that don't really read fantasy, as in, so like if you're out there and you enjoy watching fantasy and sci-fi, that kind of thing, but you're not really a big reader, the one thing I would say is that when you read like epic fantasy, that they have their own like politics, magic systems. That there's like Game of Thrones is probably like a really good example of something that probably should have been unfilmable in terms of like the fact that it's got like about 300 characters from loads of different houses, but they do a really good job, and that's why it works, because it's long form and it's many episodes. Exactly. The one thing I would say is the book that came to mind, Patch, when you mentioned it, would be the Lightbringer series from Brent Weeks. So the Lightbringer series from Brent Weeks is basically a book about where people use colors to they like. Let me explain it. I'm going to read a synopsis because it's been a while since I've read it, but I remember it being extremely complicated. Guile is the prism, the most powerful man in the world. He is high priest and emperor, a man whose power, wit, and charm are all that preserves a tenuous peace. Yet prisms never last, and Guile knows exactly how long he has left to live. When Guile discovers he has a son born in a far kingdom, after the war that put him in power, he must decide how he's willing to pay to protect a secret that could tear his world apart. Now, I know that sounds relatively straightforward, but the way the powers are portrayed is that they're like colors, like, so you can see colors and stuff, so it's just really complicated, and there's like rafts that are powered by like the color green and stuff like that. It sounds crap actually, but it's incredible. So yeah, that it's stuff like that you can imagine in your head, and I would imagine there'd be someone that could adapt it, maybe. But when you said unfilmable, that came to mind, because I was like, no chance.
But that's also the lore and like getting people into that. Because
yeah, exactly.
I think June's lore is pretty intense,
very rich,
rich. But I think Denny does a good job of knowing what to go hard on and what to leave out. But
if you think about Star Wars as well, like Star Wars is like extremely deep in terms of its lore and its politics, and I mean potentially too deep.
No, it is, and there's lots of themes and messages. But I mean, also, sorry, off topic, but kind of on topic. So previously, the idea of a TV show for Star Wars Lucas wanted to do it in like 2005, 2006, and it was unfilmable because of what it cost to do. Was now obviously because of the volume they could do these things, and then Andor kind of did the opposite, where it said, we're not going to use the volume, we're doing it more practically and all these kind of things. Yeah. There's a new series coming out which is based 100 years before the prequels, called The Acolyte. Have you seen the trailer for that?
No.
So they've gone the Andor route of no volume, because the guy who created the volume left after Mandalorian season 1. They didn't know how to use it properly, which is why you get those shots where it's like, it feels small and weird, but I don't know why. And yeah, the point I was trying to make was, if you would have said there's going to be a series about the Jedi in their prime 100 years before Phantom Menace, and it's going to be like an episodic thing of 8 episodes.
Sounds
and by the way, the production value is better than the prequels now, because obviously technology's at a point where the CG is improved and whatever else. You'd be like, not a chance in hell. So like, and my point being that so many things that were considered unfilmable before, like Jurassic Park, like Michael Crichton, that was all kind of like bought in before they even knew they had the CG to do it.
I guess with effects and stuff, like anything is possible now. I was actually more thinking of the transfer of
the world and
like
the lore,
really rich worlds and politics and magic systems onto screen, because there's so many books out there. Like the other one that came to mind, it probably came to mind because I'm just finishing the third one, would be the Mistborn series as well by Brandon Sanderson. That's basically a world full of mists and that kind of thing. So I would wonder how they would create the world in that book. But there are people out there with far better minds than me and would figure it out. And Dune, as you say, was unfilmable, and Thingy proved that. What's his name? David Lynch proved that.
David Lynch had a lot of issues with that, though, and it wasn't all his fault.
It wasn't. No.
Studio told him to essentially do like 3 films worth of stuff in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Like, he was completely hands tied. He also made such decisions. Anyway,
I love David Lynch.
I think that's us.
I think that is us, mate. That is us. A few more things before we leave. I'll mention it at the top of the show, but we'll go again. Please go and buy a t-shirt to support the pod. MoviesinaPODshell.sumupstore.com. We pretty much break even, and we'd be able to pay for Riverside, because we pay for that. Huh?
Yeah, sorry, just made me laugh. Yeah, pay for Riverside. Excellent.
We essentially fund the pod out of our own money most of the time, because we love doing it so much. Again, we've got a YouTube channel. Just search Movies in a Pod Show. It's really important. All one word, isn't that right, Tony? All one word, and you'll find us. Subscribe, please. Like and subscribe. It sounds really pathetic, but it really does help. Like, subscribe, all that kind. Yeah, touch that bell, touch it, touch the bell, turn it on. And then find me at Movies in a Podshell on Instagram. Find John. Where can they find you, John?
At jcb.video.
Remember, we only accept 5 stars, and if you give us anything less, well, you'll be sorry. We don't know what our next episode is, do we, John? Because we're very disorganised, but
We'll find out.
we'll find out, and then you'll find out.
About it. It's fine.
Yeah, right. I guess it's time to go, John. Say goodbye.
Bye.
See you.